All right, we're going to call to order the Tangipahoa Parish School Board meeting for the Superintendent Search Process Committee of the Whole, August 12th, 2026, 6 o'clock p.m. Miss Amanda, can we get a roll? I'm sorry, before we get a roll call, we're going to stand for the pledge. Miss Robin, will you lead us, please? I'm sorry, Ms. James.
Oh, you good? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You did.
Okay. All right. Now, Miss Amanda, can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Anthony,
Here.
Mr. Westmoreland,
Present.
Miss Abrams,
Here.
Miss Dominguez, Mr. Duncan,
Here.
Mr. Moore,
Here.
Mr. Piazza,
Here.
Miss Richards,
Present.
Mr. Toller.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, number 2, opening items. Item A is the superintendent search candidate interviews. Now, we're going to go into the Bailey room for this. Anybody who's here is welcome to join us. It's a meeting that's open to the public. Of course, this information will be shared with the public. Meetings are going to be recorded, so that way the public can hear the interview answers. And we will go ahead and head back there. We don't need a motion for that. Just moving locations here.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear us?
Yes.
All right.
How are you?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. All right, I guess I'm gonna start us off. I'm Trent Anthony. I'm the school board president, okay?
Okay.
I don't know how much research you've done, but we have 9 school board members in the room today and a couple members of the public that have decided to come listen in. As you know, these interviews are gonna be recorded and released to anybody who asks. We might do the mass release to the entire public. So each board member in this room is going to have the opportunity to ask you a question. We're first going to give you a opening statement if you'd like that for a minute or two. We'll also give you a closing statement for a minute or two. If you need a little bit extra time, that's okay as well. But again, we're going to start off by letting you have an opening statement, then we'll move on to the board member districts. Each person will have at least one opportunity to ask a question. So we're thinking if you keep your answers to 1 to 2 minutes or so, that should allow enough time for everybody to get at least one question in. And we're going to go in the order of our school board districts. So that being said, we're going to turn the floor over to you. And if you'd like to make your opening statement, you're welcome to. If you would like to skip that and go straight into questions, that's okay too.
Okay. I'll just introduce myself, and I just want to say thank you for the opportunity for the interview for Zoom, and I look forward to meeting everyone in person. Well, sorry, I'm realizing the camera's freezing a little bit. But yes, I do see this as an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity for the interview. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, District A, our representative there is Ms. Janice Richards, so she'll be the first to ask a question for you.
Hello.
Hello.
I need to set up. Yes. Sure, you can't see. Okay, can you see?
Yes.
All right, my question is, how do you define the proper relationship or roles between the superintendent, the school board, and the principals? And how should you respond when an individual board member asks you to take an action that the full board has not directed?
Okay.
Do I need to repeat it? You got it?
No, that's good. So I do see all the stakeholders working together. I think that's important to keep the focus on students. I realize there are roles. The board usually works with the overall policies, kind of the direction of the school for that. And it's really important to get a community input and having an open line of communication. I see the superintendent's role as the day-to-day operations, but also working hand in hand with the principals and the board. And then the principals are over their school. So I do see the roles, and there should be open communication with all. I think that's very important. If the principal's asking something, or if the board member is asking something specifically as an individual, I think it's good to answer the question, respond. But what I would do is I would respond to the whole board so that everyone's getting the same information. So if a principal's asking about, a discipline concern or, something specific, answering that and then making sure that the whole board gets the same response. I would talk to also the board and what their expectations are. Some school districts, everything goes through the board chair or the board president. And then that way all communications going there. So I think it also depends on, is this every day or is this, just one question? I think developing those communication expectations, procedures, figuring out what works for the board is really important. But I do think that, that communication and that openness, I feel like that's important, that there is transparency and communication between the principals, the superintendent, and board members.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Cole. My name is Tom Toller. I'm District B representative on the board. And my question has to do with a couple parts, but basically, what do you see happening in your first 100 days as superintendent, with two caveats? What would you consider to be definitely hands off, or you wouldn't change in the first 100 days? And what would you see as a must to do in the first 100 days?
Okay. So I would see as a must getting to know people, building relationships, figuring out all the strengths, really looking at, the current processes that are in place, your strategic plan, looking at kind of the data as far as the attendance, the discipline, the scores, all of those areas, just to get an overall view. The hands off, I would say, you look at first order change and second order change. So a first order change is something that you can do really quickly. For example, if you have the state saying, for food service, you have to have, you can't sell, food at lunch in order to get reimbursed for food, for just for an example, under the USDA guidelines. Then I would say, that's a quick change that doesn't impact a lot of people. I apologize. My internet must be struggling. But I would, okay. But I would say that, any second order change would be a hands off. Anything that is a big change and it's impacting multiple groups of people, you just wait, look at what's working first and really identify what those needs are before making any major changes. I think it's important in the beginning to get to know people, figure out what's working, and keep what's working, and getting input from stakeholders, teachers, admin, board members, community. I think it's really important to find out what's going on within the district, what the needs are, what the strengths, and keep what's working.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna go to District C.
Hi, I'm Robin Abrams. I'm District C. This will be my last term, by the way, so I'm interested in seeing where our district goes. My question is, describe the most serious crisis you have managed professionally. What did you do in the first 24 hours? How did you communicate with your board and the public? And what would you do differently today?
I would say the worst crisis, we had a student who took their life, and that was in a really small community, and that impacted the whole community. So what we did is we brought in community resources. We communicated with the family, the students, the stakeholders, just very respectfully, and then followed the community expectations and norms in that situation. And then afterwards, when people came back, we had counselors on board. We had tribal mental health. A lot of different stakeholders. I think what we did well there is really being very respectful of the traditional values there, and then the expectations, and then followed a lot of the tribal leads in that situation, and then really trying to make sure that it doesn't happen moving forward, with students and the parents and the families, and following our our crisis plan in that situation.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Glenn Westmoreland. I represent District D. Artificial intelligence is rapidly changing education and the workplace. What should a school district encourage? What should it prohibit? And how would you prepare students and employees to use AI responsibly and effectively?
Mhm. So I think that is all about balance. I feel like there's strengths in AI. A lot of schools are using it for reading interventions, for differentiation for students. So I feel like it just depends on the program that you're using. And for teachers, I would definitely encourage that because, for lesson plans, designs, I mean, it's very efficient for, presentations and creating presentations in a very timely manner. I actually use AI looking at a lot of your data, trends and patterns, where normally what I would do is I would do a 5-year trends and pattern followed by cohort. So I think it depends if you're looking at factual information, but I think it's also a balance because you also have to teach critical thinking skills, appropriate use of technology. So I feel like with students, you do have to have a balance in that and making sure that students have the skills, not just getting the information from somewhere else where it's just telling them, but really teaching those skills and the prerequisites so that they are becoming, critical thinkers, problem solvers, and they're able to do that without the technology piece as well. So I do think it's a balance. There was a science group that I did see in Phoenix, actually, and they're working with a group out of California, and they actually have an AI unit with the headgear, and it had the air, the movement. So I feel like for that particular lesson, it worked very well. And they did a lot of partnerships and grants for that. So I think it really just depends on what the needs are, what are the benefits, what's the cost, and then making sure that, that was once a week, and then students work 4 days planning hands-on. You have to have that human to human connection. I mean, that's critical in teaching. But I feel like, again, it's about balance. Mhm.
Hey, Dr. Cole, my name is Brett Duncan. I represent District E, which is mostly like the Hammond area. If I recall from your resume, you've been both a superintendent and an assistant superintendent? Or
Yes.
just-
I was an assistant superintendent of instruction. So they called it associate superintendent of instruction, and then I became the superintendent of that school. So for 9 years as a superintendent.
Okay. And all right. So for this question, whichever role, that's why I wanted to. So I want to hear from you about a time when, in your professional judgment, you were required to give your board advice that you knew they did not want to hear. If you can think of an incident like that, tell us what you did recommend, how you handled the disagreement, and what you did after the board made their ultimate decision.
So I try to talk with the board and lead up so that there's no surprises in a board meeting if something's coming up. I think that's really important as things are coming up, whether that's doing weekly updates. And then a lot of times what I would do is before a board meeting is rotate schools and give them updates of what's happening. Or so, for example, in one school, I would be at the high school, and then all the other schools could join in remotely in the library. And then that way, as situations are coming up, if there's questions, then, there's no surprises in the board meeting. And then what I would do is I would share the feedback for stakeholders when there's a decision in the board. So I know for one, we were doing for teacher, like teacher negotiations for salaries was a big thing, in which we had a few board members who only wanted to go to this amount. Other board members, there was a differences of opinion for there. So we actually had 2 board members sit in on the negotiations. We had a principal sit in, and then we had the teachers union and a group of teachers. So for that, the board members did vote on that, but they also had input as committee members. And then I feel like we really looked at the factual data of what we could spend, and to make sure that, we met the needs of our staff the increase of a lot of the cost of living, and then also within our budget, and then compared other districts as far as percents to justify those increases. So I know for that particular year, we went a little bit more than what some board members were comfortable, but we are able to justify it, based on those relationships with the staff. And then another thing we did with instead of giving a percent for the whole district, something that was different is we noticed that the kitchen staff, if you say, 1%, the kitchen facilities, custodians, bus drivers, they were paid a lot lower. So that 1% or 3% or whatever percent you have is a really tiny gap. And if you have people making over 100,000, they're making, it just kept growing. So what we did is we compared surrounding areas by each group. And then we put caps on some, and then we also, compared so that we were able to say, okay, if this person's technology, but in the next district, they're making 10,000 more, where should we be? And so that we were able to be competitive and really balance out all of our scales to keep our staff as well. So I think communication is very important. And then making sure that there is input on that, transparency, and then, talking with board members, being part of those processes, and then getting, collecting data as well, explaining the reason behind, and then anyone who's directly impacted in the decision, having them have a voice in that as well. So yes, the board ended up adopting that, with the majority, but I think it's because we went through all of those steps, and it was a long process, but it was very important, and we were able to answer questions, and it was supported.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Ask how many schools were in your district when she was superintendent? Yes. How many schools were in that district when you were superintendent?
So that was that school we had about 5 schools, so it was a much smaller with alternative.
So, and that was the one that you were superintendent for?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right, again, I'm Trent Anthony, District F. I'm gonna ask a fun one. Okay. Tell us about a significant improvement you personally led in another school system. What was the problem? What did you change? What resistance did you encounter? And what measurable result followed?
Okay. So I would say when I was in Northampton County Public Schools, I went in, and when I first arrived, they were working on a whole curriculum alignment and pacing guide for about 8 years, and they kept getting different committee members and starting all over. I feel like a strength of mine is really organizing and really taking things apart into smaller pieces, and that's probably my special ed background. So what we did is, I know that is a second order change, so we're going to give ourselves a year to make sure that people have input, buy-in, they are comfortable with the process, they have training before you make any final changes, all of those steps. So what we did is every principal selected a representative from each grade level, and then that representative was able to communicate with all the staff within that team. And then from that team, we broke out. So like the first week, for example, we gave just a task for each time. And then we were able to complete all the core subjects while people are teaching. So not doing that in the summertime, but during the school year, because we allowed the whole year process. So for example, they could look at the essential standards, what were the prerequisites, putting them in order, looking at, what materials went through for tier 1, 2, and 3, doing that before it was all finalized. So we had all the pieces for them. And then as a district, we were able to compile all of that and format everything for the staff, where people were able to make changes to that. Then the assistant principals worked on the assessments that aligned so that there was consistency, district-wide of what we were testing. And then that following year, there were no complaints because they knew what the process was. They had input on the process. They had buy-in because it was actually teachers at that particular grade level having impact on their own grade. So that worked very, very well. And I do believe in that. If you're even doing a policy change, whoever's directly impacted, so if it has something to do with the nurses, then having a committee that informs the nurses and then having them present to the board, or having that representative so that those who are directly impacted in those changes have input and decisions. So that's one example.
Thank you. Thank you. Right.
Good evening, Dr. Cole. How are you?
Hello. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thank you for joining us today. What place does equity have in our current educational system? And what does educational equity look like to you when it's in practice? And specifically, what will it look like under your leadership as superintendent?
So I feel like my background, I have always served schools and kind of the lowest 5% of populations as far as academics, because I feel like it's areas of need is where I would like to be and where I can help be part of a team. I am looking for a place that I can stay long term and being part of that process. You know, my belief, especially in as a prior special education teacher, my mom was also a special education teacher. I believe every single person has areas of weakness and every single person has areas of strength. I also believe that as far as with equity, you put services and where the needs are, so that there is an equal opportunity for everyone. And that includes differentiation based on the needs of that community to make sure that students are successful. So I do believe in that because I think that's important that, all students have those opportunities.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Me. Hi, my name is Joey Piazza. I represent District H. Our school system services 33 schools throughout our parish. Due to this large number of different regions and cultures, our schools' accountability and consistency has been a major issue throughout the years and continues to be a major impact on our current system.
Mm-hmm.
If you were tasked with the superintendent role, how would you address and improve our accountability and our consistency across all levels of our school system?
Mm-hmm. So I've worked in schools from 200 to 1,000, 2,000, 6,000. I'm currently working for a district with 95,000 students right now. And so that's a much larger district, and looking how those systems work with a district that has many more students than you have. I think you have about 2,500, or I'm sorry, you have 20,500. I think there has to be a balance between, yes, you have some non-negotiables, but you also have some differentiation per school based on what those needs are. So for example, if your district came up with something with common goals of attendance, say, high school graduation rates for the goals, teacher support, and probably some tiered levels. I do believe the district is there as a support for schools. It's not the schools being a support for the district. So really tailoring that by needs. So I would probably put teams together, and the schools that need more support, putting in those supports. If you have, I think I saw 23 out of 32 schools improvements. So, looking at that C to B for the growth, you're by 7 points. So it's very, very close district wide. So then really looking at those schools that need more support, what are those areas that they need, and really working with the principals. But some non-negotiables would probably be, data dashboard for all schools so that you can see that. And just instead of every quarter, doing it by every month so that you're really tracking students for tier 2 and tier 3, those interventions and getting those supports that they need. So academically, yes, I think there's some that would be there would be some consistency. As far as special education, I feel like a lot of those procedurals and you would have the same, but where you would tailor it is where the needs are, putting more time and energy into those schools that need more of that support.
All right, Ms. Dominguez.
Okay, hi, I'm Rose Dominguez.
Hello.
I'm gonna brag a minute. I'm the longest serving board member in the room,
Great.
three in December. So
And she's old.
and this is my
No,
20th.
you're good.
So thank you for joining us today. We appreciate, your willingness to want to be a part of our system. So my question is, how would you evaluate the effectiveness of our central office staff and our leadership and our principals during your first year? And then what evidence would you use and how would you address an administrator who is really well liked, but is consistently ineffective?
Okay. So what I would do, I would look at what tools that you have in place, and usually about probably October, you would put in those like a rubrics for evaluation. So that's what I would follow for that. One thing that I've done in the past is so for example, principals, if you, instead of checking with every single school, especially when you have larger districts, just having some type of a format of giving updates, whether it's weekly, what's going well, or what are some things that you're working on, some type of a reflection log that they have. But I would work with the leadership team and then having those consistent meetings, just to get updates on the schools. And a lot of those procedures you can see based on, whether it's the data dashboard, the attendance, the discipline, your special ed, all of those areas and departments that you're looking at, what's going well and reflecting on that, and then what areas need more support. So I feel like with evaluations, evaluations are not an I got you, but it's really about growth and then just continual growth. If there's a specific principle that's liked by everyone, but ineffective, I would work with them specifically on what's not going well and then put in some tools to help them become more effective. So it could be if they're not doing, say, data walks, and then just having a goal. So that we're going to do, a weekly data walk or a monthly data walk. And I feel like coaching is very, very important. In education, when I first went into administration, it was in like 2010. And that was when No Child Left Behind was the thing people were going into. And it was all about document people out. And that's not really the case anymore. Now it's really about supporting, providing, mentoring, coaching, the sports so that people are effective. And I feel like a lot of times you do that with, tracking tools so that people know what the expectations are, and then they're doing that. And if they're not meeting that expectation, finding out what's the reason that they're not and what training or what support do they need in order to get there. So a lot of times if principals are liked, usually people will work together to accomplish certain things if they have the direction, if they know what to do for those things. So that's what I would try to find out, using the strengths and how to get those areas of effectiveness. And it could be surrounding. A lot of times you'll have like a type A person with a type B person, as a principal and assistant principal. So if you're mixing one person here and then they work really well together, just finding those combinations. We had one teacher, if I can share just really shortly, it was my first year and I learned a really, really valuable lesson. I went into Sawmill, this was in Winter Rock, and this was many years ago, so it is okay. But the first year I was there, I was told, document this teacher out because she's very ineffective. And they moved her from the middle school to me, and I was in a really small school. And I observed her, and she struggled in math. She even struggled with numerator, denominator. I mean, she really struggled. And I was thinking, gosh, this is really an ineffective teacher. And I started documenting what she wasn't doing. And then there was a teacher in first grade that had a family emergency that, she had to resign for her husband. So we ended up by class numbers combining an upper grade class, and we moved the same lady to a lower class grade level. And what happened is that she was like the best first grade teacher. She had all classroom management. She was prepared. She had instruction. She made the highest test scores of the whole district that particular year. And we're thinking, oh my gosh. And she said, all those years, I was in the wrong grade level. So a lot of times if you just place people where their strengths are and finding that out, but that really gave me a valuable lesson of like, wow, everyone has strengths and matching them where they go and trying to find strategies to meet those needs. But I learned a lot from that example. And if there is an area of need, I would say if someone's doing something that's illegal or unethical, that's a completely different story in that situation. And at that point, I would follow the policies on. And I've had to do that, which is very unfortunate because you can't tell people the reason why and can get messy. So
Thank you.
One of our board members, Mr. Toller, has suggested that we allow one of our business community partners to ask one question, if that's okay with you. So
yes.
Melissa, we did a business related question, if you wouldn't mind. We'd like you to ask both candidates. So I'll let Melissa ask. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Melissa Bordelon, and I serve as the president and CEO of the Tangi Chamber of Commerce located in Hammond. What partnerships have you started with local businesses in your schools?
Okay. So in one community, I was on the Rotary. So we actually did a partnership to make sure all students had shoes before, but we added socks because we found out a lot of students didn't have the socks with it. And then what they did is they worked with the nurses. So they were able to give the information ahead of time instead of just having a whole bunch of shoes. So that was one that we did. I was on the board with a YMCA, and we actually started an alternative program for the alternative school, where the director there brought in a class so that students were starting their own business. And then they did presentations to us. So they actually did lawn care. I mean, they actually, they were so engaged in that. They did not want it to end. At that same school, we brought in a dental program so that students didn't have to leave school. And we actually set up one of the classes where, and it was at no cost to the school. During the day, they had dental services. So in those partnerships, we also worked at, and this is all within the same district. We had and I didn't start this, but I continued this one, where there were 5 local schools that did a co-op to get our occupational therapists, speech therapy, physical therapy, and it saved a lot of money in the areas of special ed as far as support services for surrounding schools. I've worked with doing fundraising where it was part of actually a bank where we did fundraising for the schools as well. I think they were selling purses at that time. So we walked around with different purses and bingos and other activities that they were able to do outside of the school grounds. And trying to think of what else. Each community, I've done something different. When I was in Peach Springs, I actually volunteered on the radio as a local DJ. It's called Live at 5. And every Thursday from 5 to 6, they really liked reggae music. So I played reggae music. And then every 4th song, like a celebration of a student, a staff member celebration, or a community, something that was going on. And that was something that really helped with the school that it was difficult to get parents in. But we also partnered in that particular school with every community business in that organization to have a monthly community night as part of our Title I night. So every community partner had a booth, and then they would present something, or we would do a game night, or we would add in different rooms. So like a math or reading, and then community. So yes, done a lot of the community partnerships, and I think that is critical to making sure that the school is the hub of the community, which schools should be like they were, years ago, of just kind of bringing that back. So thank you. That was a great question.
All right. Well, thank you for all of your answers. So we're going to give you an opportunity to have, a minute or two closing. And before you close, I'm sure I'll say this again after you close. So I'm just going to let you speak, and then I'll say our closing. So thank you.
Okay. May I ask a question for
Sure.
that? Or do that? So my question is kind of, what is the school looking for in kind of a leader that you're focusing on? And the reason that I'm asking this is because in some schools that I was at, there was one particular school I was brought in, and I basically fixed up all the special ed compliance. I mean, that was a major thing. And then we also did capital projects, that were kind of behind. So depending, each school's been a little bit different for that. If there's something specific that is of target, if you feel like you can't answer that, that's okay too. But this is just an overall, or
I'll take
a volunteer.
I'll take a stab at that, Dr. Cole. We have a great staff here. We have great leaders in every department you can imagine. And they do have a great team right now. But what every team needs is a coach and somebody to drive them, get them the tools they need to do the job they need, job that we need them to do. And that's a short answer, but Brett probably has a better answer. But that's what we need, is we need a coach to run all the teams. We don't expect the superintendent to be perfect at everything. We expect the superintendent to lead the team.
I can maybe sum it up a little bit. The same thing. We have a central office full of professionals. We have schools full of professionals, but they have 32 NFL professional teams, and one of them is going to go 0-17, and one of them is going to be 17-0. So I just feel like we need somebody to get us over the hump into what I consider to be perfection. And we have neighboring districts that people view as better systems, even though that may or may not be the case. And what I want for our superintendent is to make our parish the ones where our neighbors want to come in here and get into our system. So I think that's a pretty generic response, but we need somebody to fine tune and perfect where we
okay.
as well.
So systems. Okay. That sounds good.
I don't want to scare you off with this, Dr. Cole, but my answer would have been maybe a little more intimidating, which is that we need a leader that's all of the above. We have over $100 million worth of capital improvements that are underway. We need a leader that can help continue to coach the team through that. We have a district that needs additional academic improvement. And we also have a district that has a hard time keeping certified teachers. So we can continue to help improve that. I could go on and on. I mean, it's all of the above. We do have a system that has been progressing and doing well, but it's a very complicated system. We also have very complicated diversity issues. So lots, all of the above is the real answer.
So that's good to know. So, I guess as a closing statement, I would just say that, I would take this opportunity to say, I do appreciate your time. I do feel like I am up for the challenge, and as far as my experiences, and, I guess in all areas, whether kitchen, facilities, transportation, special education, instruction, I do feel comfortable with that. As far as with the state, each state department works differently. So there are changes, especially in the financial system, but a lot of it is similar as far as the grants and doing grant writing for that, and just that overall, those systems apply, at each school district that you're in. And I do look forward to the opportunity to meeting the community the parents, the teachers, the staff. I do see all the work that you guys have done and the rewards. In 2025, you guys are making, a lot of growth. And I would love to be a part of that system and really just meeting the needs of all students and, valuing the input of all stakeholders. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cole.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jinko, can you see us?
I can, yes, sir.
I'll see and hear you. As you know, I'm Trent Anthony, board president. We're just going to go through it. I'll explain the format to you. What we're going to do today is each board member is going to ask a question. We're going to add a question from the Chamber of Commerce Director, Ms. Melissa Bordelon. And we're going to start with District A and go down the alphabet all the way to District I. Again, each member will ask you a question. I am going to ask, although you do know who we are, we're going to introduce ourselves before each question so that anyone watching this interview will be able to know who we are, of course. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out by allowing you a minute or two to give us an opening statement. And then as the board members ask a question, we're going to hope that you can answer that question in about a 1 to 2 minute time frame as well. And once we've made our way all the way around, we're going to give you another opportunity to make a closing statement. So that being said, we're going to start off with District A, Ms. Janice. Oh, I'm sorry. Your opening statement first, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to interview for this position. I understand how important this position is, not only to the educational aspect of it, but you have the chamber there. So the better job that we do as an educational system, the more opportunities that the chamber can get to bring businesses in. So I'd just like to thank y'all for this opportunity. This is something I've looked forward to, and I'm ready to get it started.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Janice Richards from District A, Kentwood Independence. How do you define the proper relationship and roles between the superintendent, the principals, and the school board? And how should you respond when an individual board member asks you to take an action that the full board has not directed?
Okay. We'll start with the relationship between the superintendent and the principal. My job as a superintendent would be to make sure that the principals are doing everything he or she possibly can to move our kids, to grow our kids so that they can achieve. If we're talking early childhood, we need them to be ready for 3rd grade on proficiency. When they walk across the stage and get that diploma, they need to make sure that they can open any door they want to, what future they want, career and or college. Relationship between the superintendent and the board is a very unique one. And the goal of the superintendent is, are we going to have some disagreements? Absolutely. But the goal of the superintendent is take the wishes of the board and force them to the best of his or her ability, and to force that down to the principals to make sure that the schools are following the actions that the board has approved. The individual board member that asks for an action that the full board has not approved, I think you just remind that individual that the full board has not taken action. And if the full board takes action on this, then we will implement it to the best of our ability.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jinko, Tom Toller, District B. In your first 100 days as superintendent, what do you see yourself tackling, with 2 caveats? There's going to be some hands-off things that you wouldn't want to do in the first 100 days, and some things that you definitely want to try to tackle in your first 100 days, if you don't mind, sir.
Yes, sir. First 100 days are critical. And I think my biggest response is going to be to get into the schools and get into the communities. I want to touch every school at least a half a day, and I want to do like a 3-question check with not only students and administrators, but the teachers. I think we need to get into the teachers to find out what they're thinking, what they like, what they don't like, what positives and negatives they have. Also want to get to the community. I need to go, I don't want to say reintroduce myself, but I need to see what's on their mind. You know, I know a big issue they have right now is transportation, and we're working to fix that. But I want to be visible to the community, to regain that trust, to build that trust as we move forward. I think some things I want to do hands off is, and this is the thing that I'm going to have to work on because I'm a fixer. When I get a problem, I like to fix it. But I got to depend on other people to do that for me. And if they're having some issues, to bring it to me, and I'll give them some suggestions on how to fix it. But that's the biggest thing I'm going to have to work on is I can't fix every problem that comes to me. I've got to delegate that to the individuals that are under me.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Hello, Mr. Jinko. Robin Abram, District C. Describe the most serious crisis you have managed professionally. What did you do in the first 24 hours? What did you communicate to your board and the public? And what would you do differently today?
The biggest crisis, I think, happened this year when we had that shooting on the campus of the alternative site. That was a very unique situation in the sense that you hear about that happening everywhere else. You don't think it's going to happen at your particular site. And when it does, it seemed like it took forever to get from Amite to Hammond. My response to the public was that I had to get in touch with the superintendent, make sure she knew what was going on. She was out of town. We did have a press conference that I was able to talk to the media and give the incident and explain what happened and so forth. I think the thing that I would do differently was to go back and direct our schools and our administration on maybe ways that it could have been handled a little bit. I don't want to say better, but there could have been some things that we could have done to get the word a little bit quicker, to maybe get the police there a little bit quicker. But for the most part, I was very pleased with the response of our faculty and staff, but there's always room for improvement.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jinko. Glenn Westmoreland in District D. Artificial intelligence is rapidly changing education and the workplace. What should a district encourage? What should it prohibit? And how would you prepare students and employees to use AI responsibly and effectively?
I think AI is obviously something that we're going to be dealing with, and it has, like every social, interaction that we have, has positives and negatives. I think we can teach our students and our faculty and staff how to use it. If I want to give a speech, if I want to learn something about world history, I can search it that way. I do firmly believe that nothing replaces that teacher in front of the class. And I think our Once program is a perfect example of that. We're getting great scores with Once because of that human interaction. I think we have to be careful that the artificial intelligence does not become the instructor for our students. And I think that is going to workshops, finding out other districts that have, or maybe a little bit further ahead with AI, found out what has worked, what hasn't worked, and then bring that back to our system and then educate our individuals, students, teachers, et cetera, on the positives and the negatives of it that we found when we did our research.
I'm there. Brett Duncan, District E. Mr. Jinko, I know you have lots of examples of this, but I want you to tell us about the one that stands out to you when you had to bring something to the board that you knew we did not want to hear or would not like. Tell us about that specific one that you recall, what you recommended, how you handled that disagreement, and what you did after the board did something you didn't like.
Yes, sir. And you are correct. There are quite a few, but I'll go with everyone's favorite, which is the dress code, specifically the hoodies. Okay. And, as I mentioned earlier, that the administration, and I stood up there for the administration, we brought our recommendation. And when the board says X, Y, and Z, that is the rule of the board. I am not an elected official. You are. And the board is. And my job is to enforce the rules that the board has set forth. And, and we can go the back and forth and we discuss the positives and the negatives. But you have tasked us and me specifically as the next superintendent to bring you recommendations. We'll bring the recommendations We'll discuss them, the board votes, and then we will implement those. And that is as simple as it needs to be. And that is it.
Okay.
All right, Trent Anthony, District F. Can you tell us about a significant improvement you personally led in a school system? What was the problem? What did you change? What resistance did you encounter? And what measurable result followed?
I'd like to go with the discipline aspect of us implementing the DRC process. Before the DRC process, it was basically a one person that made the decision whether a student was going to be put out of school or not, sent to the alternative school or not. I think the DRC process has allowed more of an explanation by the parents. There's some involvement from the parents. There's some involvement from the school. There's communication there. And it's to me, it is more of an open process related to the due process that particular student should get. Some of the kickback was that some of our administrators did not like some of the decisions that the DRC made, to be very honest with you. And that was something that we've had to work on, and we've gotten better. But I know that it's something that we'll still have to work on this year as we go through the process. It is a great process, one that I believe does give the school the ability to do the inquiry, to do a better job investigating it, does give the family the opportunity to come state their case. A decision is made, and then there's always the appeal of the parents after that. So that would be the one process.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hill. Jerry Moore, District G. What place does equity have in our current educational system? What does educational equity look like to you in practice? And specifically, what will it look like under your leadership as superintendent?
Equity is given the particular student what that student needs for him or her to be successful. And that is going to look different. And that is the challenge that our classroom teachers have, is if I have a class of 25 students, I may have, 5, 6, or 7 that need something completely different than the other 22 or 23. But we've got to do everything that we can to make sure our students have whatever they need to be successful. Is that certain interventions? Is that reteaching certain concepts, building block things that they need before they move on? And I think that's going to be the challenge for everybody in my administration, from myself on down, is to giving our kids and our schools, not just our kids, but our schools, everything they need to be successful. Because what I need on the north end may be a little bit different than what I need on the south end, in a classroom and at a particular school. So that's going to be our challenge, to find out what we need to make that kid successful, what we need to make that school successful, and make sure we get it to them.
Joey Piazza, School Board District H. Our school system services 33 schools throughout our parish. Due to the large number of different regions and cultures, our school accountability and consistency has been a major issue throughout the many years and continues to be very impactful to our current system. If you are tasked with the superintendent role, how would you address and improve accountability and consistency on all levels of our school systems?
And we'll start with accountability. The key with accountability is you have to give those individuals what their task is. What is our goal? And then you have meetings and you have kind of check-ins, whether it is after 3 weeks, 6 weeks, et cetera, to find out how have they made progress toward that goal. If they haven't, we need to see how we can help them make progress. Is that a discussion with their supervisor to give them some tools in their tool belt to make them be able to get there? And the thing that you have to ultimately decide is, if I've given you all these opportunities and I've done this coaching and you can't do it, then it's going to be up to us as a school system to determine what do we need to do. Do we continue to pour into that individual if we're not getting the results that we need to get? That's for the accountability aspect. And what was the second part of your question, sir?
Consistency. How do we maintain our consistency?
And I think that is something that you have to constantly work on. It is something that as wide and long as we are, the views of the individual on the north end is going to be different than the views in the south end and in the central. But I think when you get people together and you talk about why we're doing the things that we're doing, why we don't want hoodies, why we're doing school uniforms, etc., I think that helps knock down the barrier and people begin to understand why we do certain things, whether it is the curriculum we're using or the dress code that we're trying to enforce. And I think when you see things that aren't being enforced, you got to talk to people about it, saying, look, this is what the board has approved for us to do. It is my job to enforce it, and it is your job to enforce it also. If you have an issue with that, then we need to talk about that. So I think it's just open conversations that you have to have with people about accountability and consistency.
Thank you.
Very good. I'm last, and I told these people to write a letter. I'm the longest serving board member, Rose Dominguez, and I'm retiring in December, as you know. So this is my 20th year. Thank you, Brett. My question is, how would you evaluate the effectiveness of our central office leadership and the principals during your first year? What evidence would you use, and how would you address an administrator who is well liked but consistently ineffective?
Well, I think going back to what we've talked about before is from day one for the end of that year, you have to give individuals goals that they have to hit. We've got to sit down with them and say, if we want school ABC, it's starting here. We need you to be here at the end of the year. And then you set up little targets. If I need to go from 10 to 20, my first target may be 12. My second target may be 14. And then it is my job and our job to make sure that our schools have what they need for that particular administrator to be successful. There needs to be check-in times. There needs to be review of the data. And if the data is not moving forward, we need to find out why. Is it a will or a skill issue that the data is not moving forward and the needle is not being pushed? Okay. And then it is ultimately those tough decisions that you have to make as an administrator. Me being the lead administrator is ultimately we have to decide. We have tried to move school X from A to B. Is it time to think about a new leader? And then that is a whole nother set of issues that deal with legal matters and so forth. We got to make sure in those first steps that we have our I's dotted and our T's crossed. And that is the last thing we want to do, if it comes time to hold someone's feet to the fire because they didn't meet the goal that was set in front of them.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate your willingness to apply.
Mr. Chico, I'm gonna hand the floor over, to Miss Melissa Bordelon. She's with the Tangipahoa Parish Chamber of Commerce. Probably could have done that yourself, huh?
That's fine. Mr. Jinko, Melissa Bordelon, CEO of the Tangipahoa Chamber of Commerce. What partnerships have you started with local businesses in your schools?
I think the ones we've started is, I think the biggest thing that we're doing is we're getting the community back into our schools. For so long, it's almost been a roadblock to get the communities back into our schools. And I think the biggest advantage we have is our Advanced College and Career Center. We need to get our businesses to come there and say, hey, in 5 years, what are you going to need in your workforce? When you tell us what you need, you help us develop the curriculum that we can bring to the Advanced College and Career Center to have you people and workers that are able to do the skills that you're going to need. Then that's got to trickle down also to our schools. Our high schools and our middle schools have to start getting our kids ready for those particular things. I think there's nothing more important than the agreement and the working together between the school system and the businesses, because we depend on each other. We are giving you a workforce, but we're going to need your assistance to tell us what skills you need those particular individuals to be.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jacob, after hearing and answering everyone's questions, what we're going to do now is turn the floor over to you. If you have a question for us, you're welcome to ask it, but if you would just simply like to make a closing statement, that is totally up to you.
Yes, again, I'd just like to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity. This is something that it is in my heart. Tangipahoa Parish School System has given a lot to me and my family. When my kids walked across the stage, they were able to open any door that they wanted to be whatever they want to become. So why can we not do that for 20,000 of our students? And that's my goal. There's no reason we cannot be, and I'm not into all the A, B's, and C's and all that. Why can't we be the best district in the state? But also you got to think about, behind me, I have a picture of the world. That's what our kids are dealing with. They are competing against other individuals. So why can't we be the best in our region, the best in our area, to where we have people calling us and say, hey, what are y'all doing in Tangi? And that's my goal. We're going to get there, and I look forward to leading us there. I'm going to make you very proud to be a member of the Tangipahoa Parish School System. So again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jinko.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move on to item 3, which is public input. And Miss Amanda, I'm thinking we do not have any public input. Is that correct?
No, sir.
All right, having no public input, I want to thank everybody for coming today, and meeting is adjourned.
Just put on, if anybody did pull this up, just let them know that the interviews that we did in the Bailey room are going to be available to the public online. They will just be separate from the recording of this meeting up here at this dais, but the whole thing is available to the public. So
Thank you for saying that. All right, that being said, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.